We're going to do number 49 today. Sunday, April 2nd, 2023, Generative AI and the Atrophy of Imagination. Hi, everyone. When I was puny, I went to Myers Elementary School. That was in the age before budgets had anything to say about the curriculum. So we all had art and music classes every year. As important as those classes were, art and music are obviously euphemisms for third graders. In art class, we cut words and pictures out of old magazines and Elmersed them onto poster board. Look how creative my collage is, Mrs. Hembolt. Creative is another euphemism. It's a collage. Cutting up the work of others is just vandalism. But I put it back together in a new way. I see that. But did you read any of the articles before dismembering them with your scissors? Did you take time to appreciate the images before excising them from their contexts? If you did, you'd know everything was better in its original form in the magazine. If you shove a hickory tree through a wood chipper and then organize the chips, it's not an improvement upon the tree. And today, perhaps not forever, but as I write this, AI fiction is the equivalent of a third grader's collage. The cutting and pasting is quicker, but it doesn't improve upon the original work. It's closer to vandalism than art. I can already hear the counter argument, but that's all people do. They take disparate ideas and link them in different ways. The ideas themselves aren't original, only the applications are. The human mind is incapable of inventing anything truly new. I've heard this 1,000 times with even more exclamation points, which I generally interpret as declarations of dishonesty. Consider this. At one point in history, there was Australopithecus. At a second point, there was the picture of Dorian Gray. If you're on a road trip, you can set your GPS to avoid toll booths and still reach most destinations. But sometimes there's a toll station on a bridge that can't be circumvented. And I don't think any GPS can compute a route from Lucy's house to Oscar's that doesn't cross at least one bridge of originality. We may lack a satisfactory explanation, but that doesn't make it a myth. Biology is a masterful artist. It does build upon what already exists, but it also invents everything from dandelions to dinosaurs. Having been born into the biological family, creativity is our birthright. But just like everything else, devoid of practice, it decays. Atrophy has no mercy. It's an insatiable beast that feeds on the indolent. If you let your heart lounge for a couple of weeks, your cardiovascular fitness will begin to diminish. If you don't heave heavy things, your skeletal muscle will vanish. If you once spoke fluent French but haven't oozed its vowels in a decade, you're no longer fluent. If you socialized before the age of cell phones, you had everyone's number memorized and were nimble in conversations with them. Today, no one knows the numbers of their own family members, and in conversation, thumbs are more nimble than mouths. And who isn't terrible at long division and everything else the calculator does for us? If gadgets do our writing for us, we'll lose our ability to write. Should gadgets unburden us of our imaginations, they too will decay. And without originality, the least of our problems will be the homogenization of fiction. I've been to a lot of museums and seen so many of the great works of great civilizations. Do you know what I haven't seen behind thick conservation glass in a climate-controlled chamber? A collage. I've never seen anyone cut up the artistic triumphs of other cultures and glue them back together in uninspired ways. Budget cuts to elementary schools may be stunting the artistic growth of children, but I have a solution. If we relinquish our imaginations completely, entrusting all creative thinking to collage-generating technology, we'll never have to build another museum. Just think of the savings. Okay, that's it for number 49 for today's. But I'm going to chat a little bit. Feel free to stop listening. I'm going to chat a little bit more about the interplay between effort and atrophy. And I'm going to begin by talking about physiology. Again, I teach physiology, so this is second nature. This is trained nature for me. And within physiology, my two wheelhouses are muscle physiology and stress physiology. And so I'm going to combine the two and talk about muscle under stress. And again, feel free to skip forward if you have no interest in physiology or the natural sciences. If you do have interest, welcome to my house of wheels, right? Now, any biological system, for it to not just flourish, but to survive, to function and survive, right? It needs nourishment, okay? Oxygen and nutrients and whatever. And muscle is just a tissue in need of that stuff. And how it gets it depends, right? Are you sitting? Are you being sedentary? Are you living out an idle life, or are you on the treadmill at the moment, or doing whatever physical activity you are doing? It changes. Let's start with the heart. The heart, it needs blood to pump, right? And blood succumbs to gravity and pools in your lower limbs and your ankles. As you exercise, as you flex muscle, it squeezes on the veins in that area. And in doing so, they have these one-way valves. And just like squishing a tube of toothpaste, if you squish it, toothpaste goes up. You send blood back to the heart, so you optimize circulation through muscle flexion. And then once it leaves the heart, active skeletal muscle determines its own influx of nutrients at that point too. Muscle releases byproducts from contraction. You use muscle and it releases tons of stuff. And that stuff informs the upstream arterioles, vasculature to dilate, to open up, and reroute the traffic in optimal ways for that the function of that muscle. And the nutrients themselves that are within that blood being delivered to the tissue, that is influenced by activity as well, by effort, by strain, right? That changes. So let's say sugar, a very common one. Are you sitting down, or are you moving? Are you physically active? If you're physically active, you activate this thing called AMPK. Take ATP, everyone knows what that is. Chop off one phosphate, it's ADP. Chop off another, it's AMP. AMP activated protein kinase, AMPK. That mobilizes what's called GLUT4. It's an escort to get sugar into the cell. It's not passive diffusion. Sugar needs to be escorted into the cell. And AMPK will do that in response to physical activity. That's what activates it. But at the same time, AMPK is it's shutting off glycogen synthase, the synthesis of glycogen, the hoarding, the storage of that sugar that it takes in. And it's turning on the breakdown, right? It's turning on PFK, phosphofructokinase. It's turning on hexokinase. It's turning on glycolytic enzymes. So you put fuel into the car and keep the engine running with it immediately. This is optimal. If you're sitting there, you use insulin. That's very different. You don't use insulin during physical activity. Sugar gets into the cell by non-insulin means. But during sedentary, if you're sitting there, insulin activates its own cascade, PI3K, PKB through AS160, and GLUT4 moves. But insulin also turns on glycogen synthase to put you in hoarder mode and shuts off the glycogenolysis, the breakdown, the burning of the fuel. And so you don't want insulin to be the bank teller of every transaction, right? It's only for times of kind of idle living. You want to use other means to get sugar into the cell. And if you don't, it becomes problematic. Any biological system, if you withdraw strain, right? If you withdraw stress and loading, you're going to see degeneration. And there's no reason to believe that psychological systems, psychological health, social systems and health, imagination, creative thinking, there's no reason to think that these are have been divorced from the same principles, that unloaded, we're going to see decay, right? Undeveloped, untrained, and unstrained, we're going to have a problem. And that problem is actually not just our ability to produce. That problem is our ability to appraise. We all know Dunning-Kruger, right? That's become, I mean, it came out in 1999, right? It's sort of become a cliche today. And unskilled, we cannot appraise, right? I know nothing about hockey. I can't tell the difference between a terrible hockey player and the best one in the world. Maybe I could tell that, but real skill differences. We're all going to become. MacArthur Wheeler was the protagonist of that 1999 paper. There's like bank robbers, like lemon juice, and you can look it up. We're all going to become. There's like the Wheelership of writing, right? The degeneration of our ability to appraise writing. There's going to come a time, I suspect, we may put up detours and that there may be a course correction, but in which Patrick Rothfuss at his best is essentially indistinguishable by readers from a middle school D&D campaign. There's just storytelling is all the same, right? And that has a big impact on art, right? Literature, on civilization in my estimation. But these are the consequences. Right beside those consequences are opportunities, right? There's pros and cons here. And opportunities. Here's a for instance. Let's say you love Dragon Ball Z. Okay, maybe it's Akira Toriyama, the artist. The nut-scented alien song resonates with you. What you love Dragon Ball Z, man. Cartoons. I guess it wouldn't be Akira Toriyama. You hate cartoons. You just can't stand them anymore. You're like, I'm an adult. I can't do cartoons. Fine. Some future iteration of an AI system and render that into live action. I'm sure that will happen. It's at some point. That doesn't seem far-fetched. And what's more, you can choose your own heroes, right? You want Goku to be played by Chris Pratt. Okay, $1.99, right, for licensing or whatever. You want a B-level actor, is 99 cents. Your Amazon digital credit will suffice. Whatever it is, there's pros and cons, upsides, downsides. All I'm saying is that those downsides have a steep slope. And if we don't watch our step, right, if we don't watch where we're going, we're tumbling down those fjords. It's not going to be pretty. I mean, we're not going to be having boo-boos at the bottom of that. That's it. Okay, that's all I have to say. I hope after that sort of despairing message, we all uplift our spirits by some other means, that maybe peace happens to you today, or whatever other inner joy is more important than that. Bye, everyone.